Do you consider yourself a happy person? Your glass is always half full? Or are you more on the empty side of things? And have you ever wondered why? Perhaps happiness killers are getting in the way of you feeling like Pharrell.
Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like
So, let's talk to psychologist Dr. Rachel Hannam and find out what to do about those annoying happiness killers. Rachel is a psychologist at North Brisbane Psychologist. Hey, Rachel.
Hey, Ashwin.
This is a topic that's on people's minds a lot, really. Everyone wants to be happy, but we can't be happy all the time, can we? Because life isn't like that. So what do you mean by being happy?
Well, that's absolutely right. If we think of happiness as an emotion, emotions come and go like the weather. And so happiness is fleeting. I don't tend to focus on happiness a lot in my practice as a psychologist, but in preparing for this discussion with you, I did give it quite some thought in terms of, well, what's the opposite of happiness and what, does kill contentment and things like that.
Okay, so tell us where your thinking has gone for this.
For this discussion, my thinking went, well, first of all, I want to start like this. When I told my husband, who's into kind of social and environmental justice issues, he said, I'll give you the top 5 happiness killers: poverty, discrimination, sexism. He listed all of the political and social issues, which, I agree with. And, I did want to say something about money and happiness at some point, if you can remind me.
Yeah, I will.
But I focus in my work a lot on needs being satisfied or unsatisfied, needs being met or not. And it was interesting, the fellow you just asked a few minutes ago, and he mentioned taking photographs and being outdoors. And I thought that meets needs for creativity and fun and relaxation. So I tend to think in terms of meeting our basic human needs.
Okay, but you've got to climb up the pyramid, food and shelter at the bottom and climb up.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
How do you identify some of those more complex needs?
Yeah, well, our emotional feelings do give us a clue as to what our needs are. So if I'm feeling happy or joyful or content, maybe I'm having my needs satisfied. And actually having a list of needs words is what I give to my clients, and that's really helpful to go through words in English for our needs, such as fun, meaning, creativity, contribution, support, connection. There's heaps of good words in English for our needs.
Yes.
And so getting good at decoding our emotional feelings to tell us what needs are not being met or not being fulfilled is really helpful.
Be sensitive. And just on a side point, I was in the botanical gardens the other day and this little boy was running and his big brother fended him. It was a football game, fended him. Little boy fell over and he started to cry. And his 3 adult males just yelled at him, "Don't cry, you little XXX," and just were yelling at him. So do you think that might be an issue that some men, at least, we get used to pushing away pain or not acknowledging it? So we're not really, when we become adults, we're used to not acknowledging discomfort and pain. We're just told to harden up so we don't acknowledge our needs as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think the template for masculinity in this culture very much includes pushing away discomfort, pain and other feelings.
Yes.
But I think it's everybody in this culture. We don't do vulnerability very well.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because one of the needs we're all after is connection to one another. And it's only through, being vulnerable that we get that deeper connection.
Open up. Before we go any further, Vern from Redland Bay. Hello.
Hiya.
Vern, hello.
Yeah, g'day. Yeah.
What was your question for Rachel?
Well, it wasn't so much a question. It's my own personal experience. I was a drug and alcohol counsellor with the Salvation Army for a number of years. So you learn to be somewhat self-analytical. And I've found in my experience that most people, well, everyone wants to be happy, but most people don't define it first. So it's like impossible to get there if you don't know what your destination is. For me,
you go ahead.
Contentment. That was happiness for me. So all I need is basically 2 ingredients: acceptance and gratitude.
Yeah.
And that leaves me content on a daily basis.
Gratitude's a big one, isn't it, Rachel?
Gratitude is the great interrupter of anxiety and depression sometimes. I'm a big fan of it.
I'm having a hard time. I mean, I just need to look at one simple fact, that I've been born a sentient being on a tiny little planet in the outer spiral arm of a rather small galaxy in a universe that's infinite. So the chances of my existence are literally infinite to 1.
Vern, can I ask you a question? We had a guest on earlier in the week. He had terminal cancer, and he was just explaining that He tries to focus on his mindset, but it can get really hard when he's having a bad day. Do you find that, yes, it's important to be grateful, but sometimes it just gets too much for you and gratitude isn't enough?
Yeah, well, we're all human, so, you're not going to... Like, I'm generally a pretty calm guy, but, I can get ropeable if someone pushes in front of me in traffic or something like that. But that means I've lost my acceptance. I don't want to accept that situation. That's why I get annoyed. And so I come back to that place of acceptance.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I know some people are in, very, very dire circumstances. And, for me personally, I've only just got over pneumonia. And that was pretty hard to wear as well. So, yeah, we're all going to get disturbed at time to time.
Yeah.
We're human.
Gratitude
and that's another part of acceptance.
That's right. Vern, thanks for calling in. Really wise words.
Yeah.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Rachel, so we've got that. Gratitude, acceptance. What was next on your list?
Of
Happiness killers.
Oh, happiness killers. Yeah. So when I was preparing, I thought the opposite of happiness is some of those suffering states that you were just touching on with the caller, such as resentment, exhaustion, anxiety, depression, jealousy, disappointment. So I've come up with a list of my top 5 happiness killers and the ways in which they create those suffering states, if you'd like me to run through them.
I like that. Yep.
Yeah. So the first one I put down is complaining. Because when we complain, we all like to have a vent. There's nothing wrong with having a bit of a release. You sit down with a mate and you have a whinge. But at some point, complaining turns us into a victim and we feel really powerless.
Yeah.
So that's my first happiness killer. The second one, people pleasing. So when you make getting other people's approval and acceptance more important than your own truth of your own life, and in the end you can get pretty exhausted by people pleasing and pretty resentful.
This is a common one because we have to balance this out. We work in workplaces, we're in families where other people's opinion of us can matter to a point. It's hard. And are we wired to make others happy? Is this something we have to fight against our own nature? We're not really islands, are we?
No, and let's be honest. If we feel connected to someone else through their approval and acceptance, that's pretty nice. So that's why I was, quite careful to say when you make other people's approval of you more important than your own needs and than your own truth.
What's a good way to say no to people?
Ooh, good question. Sometimes you can say, thank you for asking or thank you for thinking of me. My answer's no right now. I'll get back to you if that changes.
Yes.
There are ways. There's plenty of ways. Just Google how to say no. And
just get some stock no's. Yeah. Stock polite no's.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The third one is comparing yourself to others. So making comparisons, because that can produce a lot of disappointment and jealousy and even shame where we feel inadequate and less than. And this is a common one as well.
How do we stop doing that?
Well, I think the caller who just rang in made a good point about gratitude. When we compare ourselves to people who have more than us in our view, we're looking at what we don't have. And gratitude is all about looking at what we have got and what we haven't yet lost and what is good and what is there. It's a great antidote.
Yeah, and if we do need a point of reference, can we maybe compare ourselves to how we were a year ago or 2 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the best way to get a sense of achievement is compare yourself to, where you were in the past and what you've accomplished.
Okay. What's next on your list?
Number 4, I had caring more about what other people think than your own truth. So, this is a big one that debilitates a lot of my clients is worrying about what other people think of them. This produces a lot of shame, anxiety, and insecurity. So, helping people to figure out what their needs are and what their values are. I like to help people kind of dive deeper into the more abiding aspects of themselves, their own values and needs, and, changing the nature of their relationship to their own thoughts, because we will worry as human beings what other people think. That's natural and human. We need to find a way to kind of get a bit of space around those thoughts so we don't get so caught up in them, and then they take care of themselves when we refocus on what's most important.
Do some people have a more dependent style, or they depend more on others because of the way they were raised? They were perhaps raised in a more insecure way. They weren't quite certain of their parents' love, and so they're dependent on others now.
Yeah, and actually that's the basis of attachment theory, which is that when we have a secure sense of our place in the world through the way we were raised, we can go out into the world with a lot of confidence. But there are ways that people can work on, changing what's left behind from childhood so they can get more self-confident.
Like what? What do you do?
Oh, good one. Well, sometimes there's a bit of grieving involved, grieving the lost aspects of our childhood, the things we didn't get, letting ourselves feel sad about that. And then creating new kinds of attachments in adulthood, which do meet those needs for mutuality and for mutual support and care and connection. That's quite a big undertaking, but with support and knowledge, we can do that.
Yeah, so you need that knowledge. You really do need to introspect a lot to work out how you were raised, what kind of impact it might have had on you.
Yeah.
And like you said, maybe get in touch with your feelings so you do acknowledge the pain that's pointing you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes when we look inward and do our inner work, things get more painful before we get happier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just on another side question, is that why people often cry at those church revival meetings? Because they get reminded of childhood pain and they're often quite teary and bawling their eyes out over a suggestion of healing.
Yeah. I think it can be quite poignant when we have a healing moment in whatever form that comes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What's next on your list?
Okay, my last one. It was hard. There's so many I could have put on here. But one for the body, and that is inactivity. I think inactivity is a happiness killer because just the nature of being human means life involves struggle and tension, and we keep that tension and those emotions in our body. The body holds on to stress in the muscles and the nervous system, and we need to release some of that tension, so get the endorphins flowing. And there's a lot of research on how exercise is great for our mental health, so that's my 5th happiness killer.
Okay. Now, you did mention that happiness is not enough in life. If you could just quickly summarize, what do you think the purpose of life should be if not pursuing happiness?
Well, I often say to people, the opposite of depression is not happiness. The opposite of depression is vitality, a sense of aliveness and a sense of meaning. And most people find that when they can focus outside of themselves onto contributing in the world in some way, onto helping others, that they start to feel better.
Yeah.
So a sense of contribution, a sense of inclusion in the world tends to help a lot.
More purpose than happiness.
Yeah.
Dr. Rachel Hannam is a psychologist at North Brisbane Psychologist. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure. Thank you.